My name is Tatjana Gjurkovic. I am psychologist, and also I am specialized in two fields, play therapy and transactional analysis. In transactional analysis, I'm a provisional trainer and supervisor in psychotherapy field, and as a play therapist, I'm a registered play therapist and supervisor in that field. And you asked me where I'm coming from. I'm coming from Zagreb, Croatia.
Super. And can you tell how did it come that you combined those two fields with play therapy and TA?
Well, I wanted to be a psychotherapist. That was my wish in high school. And then I was believing that psychology meant psychotherapy, which was quite wrong perception. So after I finished psychology, then I started TA. It was actually right after I finished college, because that is how at that time I could start to study in my country psychotherapy, and also in the same time I started to work in kindergarten as a psychologist, where I saw many preschool children who I saw that they need some sort of help, psychological, and that got me interested in play therapy. So I started to study in 2007 TA, and in 2010 play therapy. And since then I'm trying to combine these two fields.
And is it used in group therapy or in individual therapy, or both?
Play therapy is used in group.
In combination with TA?
Mm-hmm. I used it individually, and I work solely so far individually and with families, so in that sense with groups. So play therapy is, well, as far as I see it, and since it doesn't have its own theory, but it's borrowing from different fields, for instance, even from psychology, like attachment theory, but also there is a lot of other approaches in play therapy, like Gestalt play therapy, cognitive behavioral play therapy, etc. So what in play therapy are doing, they are borrowing the theory and then adding on understanding play and using actually unconscious level in working with both children, adolescents and adults. So play therapy its own is developed also in the working with adults. It does sound strange, because you would not expect from adult to play, but if we think about free child ego state from a functional ego state model, then we can also see the spontaneity, the flexibility, the playfulness that play therapy is all about. If I work with children, then I will use play, and the difficulties in a way with that is that what I'm actually trying to understand is the child's play. And of course the child's play is not so straightforward as it is in working with adults. And plus in play there is unconscious material, so the idea is that the child through the play will talk about himself, about the others, and about the world, in other words, about his own script. Developed so far, because if we think I work with preschoolers, then we are also working with children who don't have a script developed yet. So what I am trying to do is through play understand what the child is communicating to me, and also through play communicate to the child. And that means that I don't need necessarily make a child aware, consciously aware what he's saying, because to many children that would be emotionally overwhelming. So what I'm doing, for instance, if the child is telling some kind of story, which he or she always is, through characters. Let's say we have a family of bears, and we have a child whose parents are in process of divorce. So let's say we have imaginary bears, and we have mama bear living in one house, and we have father bear living in the other house, and the child bear who is doing something in between or in those two houses. So the child is describing his or her own life. And he is also bringing the emotional material, and he's bringing his own view of himself and the family. And then I can take some other character who will give some information to the child characters. Very often the child needs explanation what's going on in his life, but I don't need to say, okay, your mother and father are divorcing and you're not guilty for that, for instance, but I can say with the grandmother character, for instance, saying the same things, but not saying me as a person, but saying as a character, which we know now through research that the child usually hears it easily because it's not emotional overwhelming. So that's how I use in working with children. But when working with adults, I am especially attentive about of the child ego state, of course. But since I have these young people, when usually some fixations and the script decisions are occurring, and I see how they're managing, how they're thinking and behaving. So I have now, I don't know, adult of 40 years old, but behind that is 3 or 4 years old. So that is one thing that I'm quite aware of, that and in adult life it's usually on an unconscious level, all these experiences from the past that are script defining. So I will listen to this non-verbal part, and I will also quite often suggest my clients that they can use sand tray, for instance, and also miniatures to say whatever they are saying, but not saying verbally, but saying through the characters. The simplest way is to say, okay, you can search through the figures that we have and just find some of that intuitively you are drawn to. Don't think about it and don't think why are you choosing for that in this moment, but just choose it and just put it in the sand in some position to each other, and then only that can and usually it shows completely different perspective than the verbal could be through the verbal that person is saying. And also what is great with this kind of working is that the person, the adult, can move the figures, and it's very often quite powerful thing. So if we have for instance, two figures that are not facing each other but looking maybe in another direction, then we can say, okay, can you just see how it is for you to make them look at each other? So only that can provoke lots of emotions and lots of bodily sensations. And getting back to working with children, and saying earlier that children don't need to know what they're doing and experiencing and still doing a lot of work. So this is something similar with adults. So they don't need to, not every time of course, don't need to know exactly what this character means, who he's representing, etc., etc., what we would verbally normally explore. But just moving, shifting, this brings some unconscious material, maybe not even unconscious level, but maybe to preconscious, and it can be quite powerful.
Can you tell us what results do you see in specifically in combining play therapy and TA in working with adults and in educational field also?
I see a great beneficial because play therapy offers doors to this unconscious part of us, which is very hard to access through verbal, well, sometimes more, sometimes less. The person don't have so big burden in trying to find words, trying to remember, just put outside him or herself and sees a different part, which maybe before he or her had difficulties to explore, to explain, to get in touch with, or especially for the clients who are highly cognitive and who have quite difficulties in connecting with body and with emotions. This approach can help them to switch, to make a different perspective of themselves. So in supportive surroundings, that is something some of them choose to do for themselves. Most people in groups are very fascinated by using with sand, especially. And yeah, I would say especially sand, because sand itself provokes some unconscious material without our being aware of it. So it's really talking a lot about us. So even as I said, in education setting, in training, in group setting, they sometimes are engaged in these kind of activities, and that is like wow effect. Like bringing to awareness to the adult ego state some things from the child they experienced before, yeah, without thinking about it.
And what ideas you have for future working? So do you have something you want to try in psychotherapy, combining new ideas or?
Well, I feel that I just started to combine play therapy and TA because the way I was taught was mainly verbal, through verbal access in TA. And as I said, in play therapy, there's a lot of non-verbal. So for me, how I see my development further is to continue exploring these two quite different fields, although play therapy also have a verbal part, but much less in contrast to TA, to find a combination that suits me and the way I'm working, and also theoretically combining and exploring further how we can understand play in TA terms and go as much as possible specific in that direction. I also started a training with Alessandra Pierini, training for your advanced training in a TA that already combines play therapy. So it's our major project, and we are very excited about it. So I'm constantly thinking how to. How to combine these two quite different fields.
Super. Thank you very much.
Thank you.